Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center in Tempe, Arizona, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. I'm very excited about our conversation today. We have Grayhawk Capital and Silicon Valley Bank with us, and we are going to have a conversation around what's happening in the Arizona market, and given COVID and the growth and the potential that we have here as this beautiful state with the team of people that help us get there. So please welcome to the studio, Leib Bolel, who is a partner with Grayhawk Capital. Welcome, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Karen. Good to be with you.
Likewise. And then representing Silicon Valley Bank, we have Chief Operations Officer Phil Cox and Ryan Edwards, who's the Managing Director for Technology Banking. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
So glad to have you all here. When I say here, I'm pretending like you're in the studio with me, but we are having this conversation virtual. Maybe next time we'll get you guys here in the shop. So let's start off with a brief introduction from each of you. Tell us who you are, the role that you play for the organization, the business you represent, and then a little bit about that business, and then we'll get into deeper conversations as we go. Phil, would you be willing to start off with us first?
Yes, of course, Karen. Thank you. Phil Cox, I'm the Chief Operations Officer at the bank. I've been in the bank about 13 years. I joined them originally to run the UK business for the bank, and we built that business up over around 10 years before I moved to the United States to become the COO. And I look after, in that role, kind of technology, operations, risk teams, cybersecurity, those types of business unit. So it's a big part of the bank and very much supporting, the activities of the organization and the growth that we've had at the bank as well. So good to be with you, Karen.
Likewise. And I saw on your bio also the bank is also in Ireland and Israel and Germany as well.
That's right. Yeah, we've tended to expand globally where the innovation economy is thriving. So where you find entrepreneurs focusing on technology, life science, and generally changing industries, if you like, changing the way industries work. And also where you would find venture capital and private equity investors that are supporting those businesses. So some of those places you mentioned are thriving, just like various areas of the United States are doing so.
Fantastic. And are there any plans for other countries to open up within the next year or two?
Yeah, I think our focus right now is doubling down on the places that we have opened up. There's a lot of growth coming from those places, but there are other countries where there's a strong axis between some of the South American countries, for example, into the United States, into Silicon Valley, into places like here in Arizona, and that access is important for us to connect with. So we have people that are kind of remote as well that visit those countries and are active in the ecosystem that exists there as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And Ryan, part of the same team, Managing Director for Technology Banking. Tell us a little bit about yourself, the role that you play, and then anything else you'd like to add on with regards to Silicon Valley.
Yeah. So I've been with Silicon Valley Bank for almost 13 years as well. I spent about half that time in the Bay Area, just across kind of a couple of different geographies, Palo Alto, San Francisco, South Bay Area, and took over the Southwest for the bank about 7 years ago. And so I've had a unique journey kind of getting to see kind of inside of the sales and growth engine that is SVB in kind of the center of where most of the venture is, and then coming to it's more of an ancillary market, at least when it started out here in Arizona, and seeing that growth path over the past 7 years where ventures began to scale quite a bit more in this market. So it's been a good time, and I manage all of the relationships kind of we have in the geography out here, which is in Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona.
Are you finding that has been harder, easier, the same once we kind of went into our current state of business with COVID looming? How do you find that maintaining those relationships are different for you, if at all?
Yeah, I would say it's been significantly different, as probably most people have seen or found in their lives. It's changed things quite a bit. I mean, I think relationships, just human relationships in general, are built through connection, right? And I think connection over a phone call or video is very different in how you can relate with someone, how you can kind of feel that connection. And so I think it's definitely made it a lot more challenging when you're trying to go out and build some of that value that you'd like to with people. When you're with them, there's an opportunity to connect on a different level. And so I think overall, I think the country is losing a good amount of that, where that connectivity has gone away. And as I think the result of that is still going to be unknown for a little while. But I think some of the stuff that I am seeing, or that I'm seeing as I talk to other companies that are going through some of this, whether that's within their existing employees or whether it's clients or other things, is that leads to more of a transactional nature with a lot of people, because there's that feeling that they don't have as much of a connection with someone. So I can treat this as, as though I'm on a website making a choice for a product or something like that. I think SVB brings value in a lot of ways that has, I think, minimized some of that. But I do believe that that's what could be a long-term effect, just across the companies if we were to remain in this for a significant period of time.
So well said. From a parent perspective, I've got a 14-year-old and two kiddos in their 20s who live on their own in the area. But I'm watching my 14-year-old just navigate what are these relationships like and how has it changed? And of course, from the business perspective, I wholeheartedly agree. It would be easy to default to transaction mode and just thinking, dollars and numbers. And I think those of us who are in business that are conscious capitalists and really looking for the win for everybody involved, the stakeholder, the client, the vendor, the community, will continue to build on those solid relationships. So thank you for speaking so wisely to that. Leib, I don't want to let you sit in the wings too long. Let's have you introduce yourself as a partner to Grayhawk Capital, a little bit about who you are and then the role you play, and a little bit more about Grayhawk as a business as well.
Sure. Thank you, Karen. So Leib Bolel, partner at Grayhawk Capital. Grayhawk Capital is Arizona's most established fund, founded in 1999, focused on early growth stage investments into primarily B2B, business-to-business SaaS companies. So traditionally, we would call that Series A, Series B. Those terminologies are becoming a little gray area today. So we're looking post-revenue companies that are generally generating about $2 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue, up to about 6, maybe a little bit upstream or a little bit downstream. We've been active in the Arizona market for the last 20 years, where I would say we have about a third of our portfolio. And then the rest of our portfolio are primarily west of the Mississippi, and we do have on the East Coast as well. But what we call undercapitalized markets, so areas outside of the Bay Area, outside of New York and Boston. Although we do have companies there, we are generally following rather than leading. We lead about 2/3 of our deals. And, we're very proud to be in Arizona and continuing to see what can happen locally here. And my responsibilities primarily involve anywhere from deal sourcing to leading deals to fundraising, some of the operations of the firm. So quite a broad range.
Love it. Tell me about the relationship between Silicon Valley Bank and Grayhawk. I know Daryl, who you got to meet earlier, he's producing today, I believe, reached out maybe even to Ryan on LinkedIn. We had seen you guys represented in the East Valley Chamber of Commerce, I believe. Then we were just at the governor's breakfast as well. And I know you guys were supporting that. But what is the relationship there? Can you guys speak to that? And how long has that been there? And then let's talk a little bit about why Arizona for each of you. So I'll just leave it open up to, whoever wants to jump in. But what's the connection there between the organizations and the value there? And then, of course, why have you all selected Arizona?
So
yeah, there we go.
I'll jump in over here. Sure. So, SVB has, I believe, been in the market, I think, for the last 10 years in Arizona. And, coming out of the Bay Area with I would say a forefront on focus, on the software and technology space. They were a good fit for us. And I would say that the methodology of thinking, the way that they are looking at the future is very much the way as a firm we look at, where is the evolution of technology going, and being to implement that on the banking services side was important. I would say as well, something to the same sentiment as Ryan, as he was talking about COVID, the personal relationships are really important. Ryan has been a good ambassador and a good bastion for SVB out in the community. We try and be as much out in the community as well. We see each other fairly frequently at local events as well. So having that type of rapport, having that type of relationship has been, I would say, mutually beneficial.
Ryan or Phil, either you want to add on to that?
Yeah, maybe I'll start and then Ryan may chip in. I think Silicon Valley Bank is here in this area in two ways, really, right? One is, following clients, following investors, and looking at the developing ecosystem, and Ryan can touch on that for sure better than I can. But also we came here in around 2010 looking at, setting up a center here to support the organization in some of the other functions. And we found that competing for those types of skills in the Bay Area was tough. We were looking for software engineers and we were competing with the very technology clients that we had at the bank for that talent. And so we came here and opened our office down on Tempe Lake in 2012. And now we have around 1,300 employees that are attached to that office. I mean, not many of us are going in right now, but we long for those days, I think, to return. But so we kind of have this dual representation here, and certainly from the support function where we have IT professionals, software engineers, those in security, people running bank operations, so opening bank accounts, supporting payments for our clients, credit card support roles, lots of varied roles here that we have in that Tempe location. But Ryan can give a little bit more color about our market-facing activities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen just amazing progress, I think, over the last several years. I mean, I've been here 7 years, and I look at the progress, not just that SVB's made here, but I mean, really just the pool of talent that's growing here, the quality of people that are here. People like Leib that I wasn't here 7 years ago when I connected, or wasn't involved with all the stuff that's going on, and there was a limited number of funds. Although Grayhawk's been around a long time, there really hasn't been much activity on a lot of that side. And we're seeing that growth happen. We're seeing the people that are coming here really wanting to engage with everyone. I think some of the biggest value that I found in a market like this is that everybody's supportive. It's a very different market than a lot of other places around the country, where you find that the people who are here want to work with each other and want to support each other, want to prop each other up. I see companies that talking about each other. I don't think there's that, at least not as much of a competitive type nature of, well, I want to push this company down so I look better. Leib's not going to be out, talking down about a different fund in the market. It's like, hey, how can we partner together? Are you seeing good deals? Let's talk about how we can, find those together. And it's just a huge value that is allowing a market like this to mature faster than maybe it would have if there was kind of a different mindset for the people here.
Yeah, I'll jump back. I actually think I'm going to add on to that, Karen. Just accessibility to market. The accessibility of how executives, key leaders in the community have been really open to connecting with people who have ideas. And I think that resource locally here has been, it was definitely one of the reasons why I came down to Arizona. The friendliness, and I would say these people were willing to say the truth, and be able to speak their mind and to be able to share their wealth of knowledge and resources and time. I had a startup myself, which I moved down over here in 2015. And long story of why I moved here, I was racing down in an Ironman race down in Tempe, and I fell in love with the place, built some great relationships. But the people that I was introduced to, cultivated relationships to, was something that really appealed to me, and I think has resonated through the ecosystem that we have.
I absolutely agree. We had mentioned in the green room, I had asked if y'all were members of the Technology Council, and you all enthusiastically said yes. And your pal, Steve Zalstra, you had each mentioned, and I get to share once a month in that experience to talk on the AZ TechCast podcast with Steve. And the sentiment is across the board, I think, here in Arizona. When I opened the studio 4 years ago, we had a show that really was focused on what is Arizona as a business community? Like, what are we landing on? What are we calling ourselves, right? And sometimes it was around collaboration. Sometimes it was around the frontier and just, the Wild West and being able to come up with new great things. And depending on the industry, the conversation was slightly different, but consistently, especially with the folks who come high tech and have the conversations with Steve and I each month, that camaraderie, that collaboration, that willingness to, reach a hand across or a hand up is huge, not only from the universities and our educational sector, both private and public, but also our nonprofits and our community leaders, our government, you name it. We are, I believe, a force to be reckoned with as a state that says, listen, we've got beautiful weather. We've got great access to Canada and Mexico, and as well as the major airports. And we are a group of people who are willing to make a difference, and we care about our community. So I appreciate that each of you have reflected on that as well. Leib, I want to ask you to share with us that in 2021, there were a number of large financing rounds in tech space. Do you see that there's a growing appetite from larger institutions to back companies in this market? And does this show any other trends? Where are we at there?
So there were a number, primarily in Q4 of last year, some what we call mega rounds, some significant rounds. You had Nextiva, which was Arizona founded by Thomas Guarney and Tracy Conrad. They built a fantastic company in Scottsdale, and they brought on their first financing round of $200 million from Goldman. You had Paradox as well that had a significant round. You had the likes of one of our portfolio companies, eVisit, that raised $45 million from Goldman. And Emerge, some local serial entrepreneurs that raised $130 million. So I think we saw, if I'm correct, about 5 mega rounds last year, which accounted for...
You got to mention, Leib, sorry to cut you up, you got to mention Persephone, because I'm 10 feet from their office floor right now, and I'm going to have to go say hi to them and tell them that you mentioned it.
Yeah, they raised, if I'm correct, $110 million. Lesson raised, I think, just over $200 million. So yes, thanks for that, Ryan. So we did see some significant rounds. Those 5 companies themselves accounted for about 45% of all venture capital in Arizona raised. And throughout the year, I think we saw about 1.8 billion in venture capital invested into Arizona. In terms of ranking, I think if you look at the NVCA rankings, the National Venture Capital Association rankings, we're about 17th in the nation, which is pretty consistent throughout the last 5 years. So, I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. If we look at, what we're seeing, boots on the ground, our deal flow, both I'd say in quality and quantity, has gone up over the last couple of years. In terms of how much capital that we're attracting, I think we're seeing more significant rounds, which means that there's maturing companies happening here. I would hope and anticipate that continues to happen. But, something that you mentioned, Karen, is like, how do we describe Arizona? And sometimes people are just, they try to be able to associate it with Silicon this and Silicon that. I really believe that we're our own state. We've got our own uniqueness in many areas. And we've got a lot of growth to do. I think it's happening. I don't think we're anywhere close to the ceiling. If we look at the amount of venture capital that's actually been, if we look at on a percentage basis, I think we account for less than 1% of venture capital raised in the entire, in the entire US. But, as I specifically with the pandemic, people are moving over here, entrepreneurs are moving over here. We've got engineers, talent moving over here. So I would say there's the significant upside. I don't think there's been a more exciting time than now. There's a lot of work to do. And I would say as well, if we look at comparable states in terms of geography, in terms of population, if we look at the likes of Colorado or Utah, and we look at, we have some sort of comparison side by side. And I would say specifically Utah, because I think there's a lot that we are seeing that is starting to replicate some of what got Utah off the ground into what a great state it is. We have some incredible entrepreneurs locally that have had successful exits that are now investing back into really early stage companies, into seed deals. And I would probably say there's about half dozen of notable ones. You can call them either angel investors, or they've allocated a specific amount of capital to fund really early stage companies. And that's going to have a significant ripple effect, I think, over the long run.
What are some of the misconceptions as it relates to venture capital or even, the banking that you guys do over at Silicon Valley? One of the things I kind of saw across my mind is, as a few of you were talking just now, were those headlines that says there's not enough money in Arizona, there's not enough venture capitalism in Arizona, and yet every time we're in these kinds of conversations, I hear the opposite. So, could you speak to some of the misconceptions and really, how can we continue to demystify some of the rumors that are out there?
Well, I think some of it's misconceptions and some of it's accurate, right? I mean, there is a lot of work to do in Arizona. It's not like, oh, well, there's been, Leib mentioned, I think three or $400 million rounds, less than another company that raised 170 million last year. I mean, those weren't happening if you looked back even maybe 3 years ago. I mean, there wasn't rounds like that happening. There weren't billion-dollar valuation companies in the venture space. There were private equity exits and things like that would happen occasionally, but I mean, I would say true venture rounds, we didn't see $100 million rounds. And so for people to say, yeah, there's not enough venture capital, yeah, there really wasn't. It was pretty minimal here for the amount of capital that was coming into the market compared to the size of the population, what you would expect for a market like the size of Phoenix or Arizona to have. It was limited. And I would also say there was definitely a challenge around talent. Coming from the Bay Area, I think that there's always going to be that complaint, though. So one of the things that I found coming here, people complained similarly, honestly, that I heard in the Bay Area when I go see founders were like, oh, we have trouble hiring. We can't get this software person. We can't get that. And in Arizona, the people have had the same complaints, but there's less companies to compete with too. So, it's sort of that challenge is going to be there, and it's going to, especially with COVID now, with the ability to work anywhere. I think that's going to accelerate where there's not going to be a market where you're going to say, well, it's easier because we have a bigger population or because there's more software people here. Because if I can work anywhere and they're going to pay me the same at almost any location, then the competition by these companies goes up. So I think that's definitely was a challenge that's continuing to be there, won't go away. I think the capital piece that was complained about for many years, I still believe exists here to some extent, in that those large rounds that we're talking about, those are being led from out of state. And these are companies that are hitting enough scale, have a big enough market opportunity, have a strong enough management team, have all the things that someone's looking for who's going to write a 30, 50, $100 million check or be part of that size of a round. Those types of investors don't care where you are either. Because if your company hits the metrics and is doing well enough and meets all of the qualifications for someone like Leib who says, I want to invest in this company, he doesn't care that you're in Arizona. He's going to say, this is a great company. I have the opportunity to get in here. I want to be in that deal. And now I think that changes a little bit when you have earlier stage companies. So the angel folks that have made some returns over the past several years because of the exits that are happening here and have been able to start to put money back into this market matters, because a lot of those folks would prefer to allocate with someone close by and someone who they know, understand, especially when the business doesn't have enough traction yet to go out and say, I can check the box on these, SaaS metrics before I invest. So those types of things are harder when you're writing a $500,000 check, right? When you're writing $1 million check, those types of investments oftentimes are more local. And I think Arizona still doesn't have enough probably of the early stage that they should, for the size of the market, to push maybe as fast as it could if there was a little bit more of that early stage capital to help accelerate more earlier companies. In the Bay Area, you get kind of a shotgun spray all the time. I mean, if you're a company and you're out fundraising, you're either going to raise in, within a year if you're early stage, or you're dead. Right? In Arizona, I'll see companies raising for years. And that's a different mentality, that the expectation is like, having a business versus having a business that you expect to be venture funded at some point are different options, and both can work, but it's depending on which path you want to go down, you need to kind of execute in a certain period of time. So that's something that I find different about this market that I think maybe doesn't need to change, but would definitely help on the venture side if we want to see the exponential growth continue here.
Phil, And again, anybody can jump in here. Let's talk a little bit about the talent pool. And I said Phil only because you've been quiet for a while. So if I'm picking on you, anybody else can jump in too. But let's talk about talent. We've talked a little bit about the need for great talent and drawing them here. But now we can work, really just anywhere, especially in the industries that you guys represent. What as a business community and what as educators can we do to continue to encourage and enhance and increase high tech careers? Like, is there an area when you sit back and you think, gosh, we ought to be doing X, Y, Z, and we need to be doing more of this? I'll leave it open to everybody, but Phil, I'm going to pick on you first.
Well, you can very quickly be a victim of your own success because you come to an area like Phoenix to tap into real talent, and before long others have come and there's quite a lot of competition for that talent, and so it maybe changes over time in terms of the availability of that talent. I think for us, with our focus on making sure that we're building a diverse and inclusive workforce at the same time, that our discussions with organizations like ASU, which has such a rich talent pool that's coming out and thinking about what do I do after I've been to college and what are the opportunities available to me, and ironically looking from campus down in Tempe at all of those businesses that are along the lake and just thinking that we have to do a better job engaging with the likes of ASU to get that talent, to see the opportunities. We have literally 1,000 unfilled roles across the bank, and many of them are here in the Phoenix area. It's a big focus for us because otherwise your focus will drift to other locations over time if you feel that the competition and the availability of talent is more of a challenge in this area. So we still see it as a very serious part of our platform and the opportunities that we have to build the company at the bank. But it's definitely, prices have risen here and salaries have risen and so on, which is a reflection of the success of the area. But I think a lot of companies like us are focused on making sure that we're being sufficiently inclusive and diverse in accessing that talent pool as well. And that's where the likes of ASU and others come into the equation as well, because they have that richness in the talent pools that they're developing too.
Leib or Ryan, any thoughts that you want to tag along there?
Yeah, I think Phil's spot on in terms of, people and companies have come here because of the talent, and then it suddenly becomes a little scarce, and that's reflective of, the success that we're seeing, the amount of companies that are coming here. When I see companies moving over here, a large part of it is to be able to, it's cost efficiency, being able to earn something that may be less than the Bay Area, but the quality of life is so much more. And I think, COVID has driven many professionals to realize that they don't need to be in an office every day, and they can be as productive with the types of tools and platforms that technology is able to provide for them. But it does stretch the talent pool when it comes to hiring. We see it. I would say we see it in our portfolio companies as well. We see it just locally, I'd say across the board. I think talent is something that we have really trumpeted, like ASU being, the amount of engineers that are coming out of their programs, whether it's the other colleges in the state. And there's some great talent coming out, but is there enough to be able to, to fill the pool of open, of open opportunities in companies? So I would say, even we're seeing a lot of virtual hiring as well. Local companies that, they're based over here primarily prior to COVID, they had 100% of their workforce were local. Now they are all over they're all over the country. Some of them are even international. And I think that has broadened people's horizons into how to be able to conduct business and still be successful. But, I think, Maricopa was, I think, the largest growing county in the United States over the last year or two. I believe there were 600 people moving here a week. And that, again, is testament that people want to be in this region. I think we see it in the traffic on the highways. And, that's definitely increased. But nevertheless, I think it's posing, a challenge somewhat that I'd say many organizations and academic institutions and workforce groups are trying to address as much as possible.
I think that we have a note of caution in our mind about how this hiring pattern is going right now, which is if you, as Leib rightly says, if you have a talent first approach and you say, actually, I'm looking for a software engineer, but they're based in Chicago, we don't have much of a representation there, but we're going to hire the individual because they're absolutely the right talent. Is if you fast forward a couple of years, maybe we are, we swing back to being more in the office, or at least, a decent amount in the office. And then this more confetti but talent-based hiring may not, turn out to be a great thing. So I think that we are trying to navigate that to say, do we really go full into, hiring across the United States? People are working from home. We can be relaxed about that. It's all about talent. It's all about finding diversity and as well in that talent versus, well, hang on a minute, because if we start going back to the office, then we'll be flying these people in to have meetings and gatherings, and it will look rather foolish. So we're trying to navigate that, but every company is trying to navigate that and think about, second guess how life will be in maybe 24 to 36 months time. And it's a hard one to call because we probably thought in November that life was starting to get back to a little bit of normality, and then we get another wave of COVID. And so that's been making us scratch our head a little bit and try to think very carefully about how we play things in the hiring.
Arizona Commerce Authority and the chambers, again, the conversations that I've had an opportunity to sit and witness and participate in, it's that level of thinking that all three of you have shared where, okay, here's where we're at now, right? Let's look ahead. How are we going to behave? And what's the impact going to be if we stick with that track? And should we look at other alternatives? I think that's one of the greatest things about our leaders here in Arizona, that each of you have exhibited this willingness to say, we're going to move in this direction, but we're also going to be, looking on the defensive driving techniques that each of you are speaking to. I think that makes a huge difference. Can we talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Are there particular programs that either of your organizations have in place? Again, sometimes I will speak to just recently being at the governor's breakfast, and Daryl and I had the back of the room seats, right? We were just there to listen in and find out what's going on from a state perspective and share with the business community. But as I looked over 100 people ahead of me, it was a sea of a lot of people looking exactly the same way. And Daryl and I looked at each other and thought, okay, where is the diversity? Where's the inclusion? So are there any practices that you have in place? And then again, on a broader conversation, what can we be doing as a community to be more inclusive and be more diverse?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start and the others chip in. So we have really extensive programs around this at the bank. And I think that we focused on gender diversity probably in the 5-7 years ago. We really started focusing on that a lot. And now, it's very much a mixture of both gender and race diversity. And, it's clear that as you really look into the details, we are underrepresented in a number of cases based on the communities within which our businesses are based. And I'm also on a not-for-profit board called Next Gen Cybersecurity. And this is, looking at just all of the gaps and roles that are available in spaces like that, and how to get underrepresented minorities to actually think about careers in those areas. They're very well paid, they're exciting areas to be involved in. People with those skills can go and set up their own companies and build their own products and so on. So, focusing on access. And of course, the other, I think, transparent measure, companies are now publishing information about their senior workforce and what does diversity look like at the company overall, but what about the top 10% of roles? And how does that look between men and women and your Black and Latinx communities and everything else? So very focused on it. Every single new hire that we have at the bank has to go through a process of validation. Have we looked at a diverse talent pool? Have we looked far and wide enough? Clearly, in some areas right now, it's not a diverse talent pool. And so you have to navigate that as well. And so efforts to have longer term programs that create a difference in the talent pool in certain skill areas, I think should go hand in hand with, what we're doing today in terms of hiring. But of course, every company out there is kind of starting to think about this. And so those diverse candidates, that they're getting a lot of approaches and a lot of opportunities could be available to them. And that's great too, right? Because that's going to accelerate. We use the chief of staff role. So a lot of senior people at the bank have a chief of staff. We use that role specifically now for diverse candidates only in those roles, because that gives those employees a real knowledge of how the company works, how we think about things, the values and the culture of the organization. And it really gives them an opportunity to springboard their career and get to more senior levels faster by going through one of these chief of staff roles. So just one of the ways that we've tried to think about things.
I want to speak a little bit about it. I think that it's something that I, really would like to see improved upon a lot. I think I notice that regularly when I'm going to events and when I'm, even when I'm, just meeting with companies just out, it seems like it's a common thing. And, when I'm doing events or things like that, and I'm trying to, invite people, and it sometimes it feels like there's a challenge even when you're looking hard, right? I mean, and I often wonder how much of that is there's a lack, in of people within that segment, and then sometimes it's just, is there not connectivity within the right people to get to those people? I tend to think there's a little bit more of the secondary than there should be right now, where we're not connecting all the time with some more of those groups where I think we can be more beneficial. I would like to see how that can be improved significantly. I see the amount of venture capital going in the minority space like 4% right now, right? I mean, and you can't tell me that there's 4% of founders are minorities, right? So that's a significant problem that needs to be corrected. I think there's some funds that they're focused on doing that. I think I'm trying to focus on doing that as we, making sure we're filling the top of the funnel with companies that, fit as many categories as possible as we're looking for deals, and not just kind of going with, well, this one person connected me with someone, so this has to be the best company because I just, threw it right there. It's like you got to look a little bit harder and make sure that we're expanding, to make sure we're hitting the minority female population as much as possible, which right now is just a significant gap in the mindset. I think the biggest part of it.
I agree. I think it is mindset. Leib, did you want to jump in there too?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a heavy topic, I think, for so many, and something that I've spent a tremendous amount of time in looking at companies that we've funded and that are founded or are managed, have senior executives in minority roles. We're looking at it from, I think there's a couple of issues. Number one is we've been incredibly proactive in building a network associated with the fund of minorities, because I think the natural tendencies that we have is that we know what we know and we don't know what we don't know. And just a case in point, I spent a lot of time in Israel. I spent about 7 years in Israel. I see a lot of companies out of Israel because that's where my network is. And if one can be proactive in really putting efforts into expanding your networks within things that are not within your primary network, then you're able to see opportunities and you're able to get perspectives from that network about who they know and what they know. So I'm looking at it from an investment perspective. We've been continuously doing that, and we want to be able to see that increase. And I think we will do that. We will see that over the long term. We do have, we do have a couple of companies, I'll say a number of companies that fit under the diversity spectrum, but there's a lot more that I think where there's really good quality that we haven't tapped into yet. On the other hand, I mentor a number of minority or underrepresented founders, just helping them from the really early stage. Unfortunately, many of them are doing well. And that you can call it just a pro bono work and being a mentor. And, one female founder told me recently, she said, Leib, I've raised a significant amount of capital, but up until the last few weeks, I've never felt that the reason why I haven't raised my next round is because I'm a woman. And that, it's painful to hear because she's a fantastic CEO, great company. And to know that this still exists, and I think we all do know that, there are barriers and a long roadmap, ways to go. And, we take it on ourselves to do the little parts that we can to be as proactive as we can within the ecosystem, because there are some excellent underrepresented founders over there, just out and about. So I think us doing our own little bit, I think will have that ripple effect, or all around, and something that we are very tapped into, both within as a firm and as where the opportunities are. And I would say just the basic, the basic ramifications, positive ramifications, when there is inclusivity and diversity within leadership, the things that can be observed, points that can be made, perspectives that can be shared, it's a win-win.
Yeah, I would add, I see some of the other challenges are, I think, folks that are not within the same, whatever it is, cultural or, whether it's male, female, or other things. I think there's a feeling that people don't necessarily understand the needs of all those different people and what might be different. And I've seen within deals, when I've shared maybe, decks with people or other things, that the feedback sometimes I get on some of those companies from investors is kind of like, oh, I don't really, this doesn't seem like it would work, or, I don't think it's a big enough market, or whatever it is. And oftentimes it's not something I would use, and I don't get it, so I don't like it. And they don't necessarily take the time to go in and say, well, is this something that actually is valuable for someone else? And I really just don't understand the market. But it's easier for me to go, well, no, I haven't seen anything like this before, so it's probably not something that I would invest in, so I'll just pass. And I think that's an easy way for people to kind of just say no to something that I think is hurting the DE&I, type of things that people are trying to do, because people can do that, and they're not necessarily doing it, I think outwardly, to avoid, but they're kind of going, I don't get it, and I'm not going to put the time in, so it's a pass. And you have enough of that's making it challenging, which goes back to this is why 4% goes into a certain category that should be, probably 30% or 40% or whatever it is. So those types of mentalities I see that regularly, and that's where I think it's going to take a lot of people to kind of make sure we're all pushing kind of together, and kind of maybe forcing, when we hear stuff like that, to say, what's the real reason? Because it seems like, did you do enough here? And I think it takes the folks like, Leib and I and Phil to kind of actually push someone to that next step, and not just let it go on some of those things, to help kind of progress some of this along.
Yeah, you have to believe at a company like ours that's growing and hiring a lot of people, you have to believe that your company will be better with a diverse talent pool, and that people with different experiences, backgrounds, whatever measurements you wish to come up with, that you believe you're a better company as a result of that, first and foremost. And secondly, let's not forget the word inclusion, because diversity is about, statistics, and we don't really run the company on statistics, but inclusion is about whoever I am and whatever my background is. Do I feel like I can bring my true self to this company and into this job? And I'm not masking anything. I'm not hiding any part of me. I'm bringing my full self. And because the company wants that, they want to learn from me. They want to learn from my experiences and points of view, as well as their own. One of our values is learning and improving. It's being open-minded to the viewpoints of others and so on. And that's more of how we measure ourselves, is how our employees feel about how included they feel. Diversity is just one part of that. It's also about the values and culture of the company, and senior leadership and so on. So it's a big topic, and something which is very important to us, and I'm sure many companies and investors and so on. So we all have a part to play in this.
Agreed. And to go back to what Ryan said, that that encouragement and that nudging, right? When we're thinking inside our box and we're sitting in a room or a conversation where we're getting this little ping that says, let's think outside the box, let's look beyond our comfort zone or beyond our network, being able to voice that and speak to that. I sit on a couple of boards. Recently, we lost a couple of people and we're saying, okay, it's time to expand the board. And our president, very well-meaning, said, "Yeah, we need to look at diversity and inclusion." She says, "I know it's hard, but I also know we need to check the box." And we are on a Zoom meeting, and I thought, okay, I just need to speak to that because it was well intended, but it's that mindset, that fixed mindset. Who says it's hard? If we decide it's hard, of course it's going to be hard. So let's drop that language. And then we're not just checking the box. These folks, whoever they are, from whatever area they represent, we need to see, as Phil and Ryan and Leib just said, see the value, have everybody come to the table with all of who we are. There's a whole nother conversation we can have about mental health and what COVID, I think, the gift that COVID has given us in some respects, to be able to be self-reflective and look at how am I taking care of me, my mental health, my physical health, my well-being, my relationships, all that. So this is a really important conversation, and I'm grateful for each of you willing to have this with us. Some of the things that I've heard you say, what we focus on, we get more of, right? So when we have these conversations, all the things that we've talked about today, if we continue to have our milestones set and the way to track it, whatever that is, and we focus on it, we're going to get more of that. And I think that's fantastic. The difference between, of course, the growth mindset and a fixed mindset as it relates to, again, all the conversations we've talked about, we've got to be willing to say, this might be uncomfortable, it might be new, or it might be different, or I might not be the smartest person in the room. And that's okay. I'm willing to step out, and I'm willing to just see where this takes me and learn from a different group of people or a different setting. And then, of course, going way back to the early conversation, this idea around relationships versus transactional opportunities. Everything that we've said, even though we are, singularly dimensional on the screen today and doing less and less in person, if we can continue to focus on the relationship, I always say first with ourselves, right? But of course, the people that we break bread with, and then widening our circle to see what's available to us. And all of you have been a great example of that today. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation today. Is there anything as we close out our segment that I hadn't thought to ask about yourself professionally, your organization, and the people you serve that you want to make sure that we have a chance to touch on?
I think so.
I would just like to thank you, Karen. It's for us, it's an important part of the local economy and the success of this area, this innovation economy, as we refer to it, and companies that are really thinking big about disrupting the way industries have worked, right across all kinds of industries as well. And we're here to support those businesses across the United States and around different places in the world, and very happy to be involved in the conversation. So thank you.
My pleasure. And that's a great segue for us as we close out today's segment. For our listeners who may not know your company or you individually, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? And who is that that you would invite an opportunity to come and connect, right? Who are you looking to stay connected with? I can't remember, maybe it was Phil that mentioned there's a lot of, opportunities and jobs that still need to be filled. So we might talk about that, or investors or companies looking for funding. And I think all three of you are on LinkedIn. Is that the best way to find you? And let's just have each of you finish off with a comment around how to stay in touch, who you're looking to stay in touch with, so that our listeners who don't know you yet can stay in front of you. Ryan, you want to start for us?
Sure. Yeah. I think, yes, absolutely. Investors and companies that are looking to grow and scale. And, it doesn't have to be someone that's already hit that growth path and is already on a ramp upwards. I'm very happy to talk to people all the time. I like to hear about what businesses people are even contemplating and what they're working on. And, if there's ways that I can be helpful, supportive. I do, look at decks that people send to me often. I, sometimes send those on to, angel investors or seed investors for companies if they're at the right stage. That's not a, all the time type thing, but I, want to be helpful whenever possible. So yeah, I would say definitely feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and I will happily jump on a call and hear what's going on in your life and the world, and how I can be supportive. If there's anything I can do, I want to help people. So yeah.
Awesome. And svb.com for the website for you guys, of course, LinkedIn, and then Facebook, SVB. So S as in Sam, V as in Victory, B as in Boy, Financial Group. Also on Twitter and Instagram as Silicon Valley Bank. Phil, last words from you.
Yeah, so as you just said, all of our vacancies are on svb.com. Very happy for folks to contact me directly on LinkedIn as well if they think we can help them in any way personally or with the business side through Ryan and others. So that's the best place to start.
Perfect. Thank you. And Leib?
The best way to reach me is going to be through LinkedIn, and also to follow Grayhawk on LinkedIn as well. Probably get the most up-to-date news there. We do have a new website rolling out in a couple of weeks, so you can definitely take a look at grayhawkcapital.us. You'll see an updated website coming up soon. In terms of connecting with people, always happy to connect with people who are navigating this crazy venture capital journey, if they're raising capital or if they're thinking about raising capital. It doesn't need to be, where Grayhawk is focused. If they're just looking for a sounding board and understanding what a cap table is, understanding, what's the best go to market in terms of not on the product side, but really in terms of if raising capital is the right thing for them. I mean, especially early stage founders that haven't been down the road, it could be pretty big whirlwind for them. So always happy to be a sounding board. If they're looking to raise capital, always happy to talk to them. I refer a lot of deals to other groups that we've co-invested with in the past. It may not be a good fit for us, but just see us as a resource. As part of the great and growing ecosystem that we have in Arizona, and just people who are looking for opportunities. So if I can help on job placements, I do that fairly often, and just feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. Ryan, I want to thank you in particular. I believe, again, that you and Daryl connected, and you were wise enough to bring Phil and Leib on with you today to share your success as well as your focus and where we're headed really as a state as it comes to our economy and taking good care of our families and our communities. You've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center right here in Tempe, Arizona. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean business. Until next time, I'm Karen Nowicki. Thanks again for listening.